Hello, Karey. Thanks for coming on the podcast today.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Shane.
Good. I'm excited for our conversation today. You're a very inspirational person. You're a coach, a life coach, and you're a pioneer of the JOMO mantra, which is the joy of moving on, right? And you work with clients all over the world to help people to manage their lives better, deal with stress, overwhelm, create balance, build up resilience, and really just find a better and healthier and happier way of living life, right? And it's such a powerful thing that you're doing because it's so important in our world today. There's so many people that are suffering from all of those things and just not knowing what to do about it. So how did you kind of get into this field? Like, where did it come from?
Yeah, thank you for saying all of that. Well, JOMO's been around for quite a while, actually. I'm not exactly sure when it kind of hit the scene, maybe about the same time that social media did, with everyone speaking in acronyms now, like LOL right. And WTF, But it was sort of initially said to be the antidote to FOMO, which is the fear of missing out, which for someone like me, who I would describe myself as an extreme extrovert, as someone who really doesn't like to miss out, who wants to do all the things all the time and be a part of it. Mm-hmm. The traditional JOMO stands for the joy of missing out. And it was sort of that antidote to the people like me who say yes to everything to the point of overwhelm and exhaustion. It was this whole mental mindset to say, find the joy of saying no and missing out. But for me and the personality that I just described, it really didn't work for me. And so I changed it to, as you said, the joy of moving on. And that really came in 2017 when I was in the middle of my stage 4 colon cancer battle. I just, as you might expect in a cancer battle like that, when I'm going through chemotherapy and radiation and I'm having to have surgery after surgery, there just was so much in my life that I was being, quote unquote, forced to miss out on, forced to quit, forced to stop, not being able to attend. And I was really struggling. It was really hard for me. And a girlfriend of mine said, maybe this is the time for you to finally embrace JOMO.
Right.
And I was like, okay, I hear you and thanks for sharing, but it just really, I don't think that's going to work for me. It just feels so counter to my personality. And it also feels like it's a bit of, well, I guess I'll just figure out how to be happy, how to find joy. That all of these things that I loved to do are now no longer possible, at least at the time, no longer possible.
Right.
So in thinking about it like that, I thought, I'm going to change it. For myself, I'm going to change it to the joy of moving on, which means how can you look at what's happening in your life and look at the things that you're, quote unquote, missing out on or that have changed for whatever reason, and examine those things and what parts of those things do you still want to keep? Why do you want to keep them? And is there another way that you can give that to yourself, that you can achieve that feeling, you can complete that task in a different way that does support and is in line with where you are at the moment? So an example that I use a lot was during this time, a girlfriend of mine was celebrating a big birthday and she was throwing a big party. And I really wanted to go to show her my love and support and celebrate this big one with her. And there were also some other people that were going to be there that I hadn't seen in a while that I wanted to reconnect with. But the joy of missing out would have said, well, I can't go because I'm tired and my immune system doesn't allow me to be around that many people. So I guess I'll just stay at home and figure out how to be happy with that by watching a slasher movie or something to take my mind off of it. Right.
Yeah.
But then as soon as the movie's over, I'm just bummed. Then I'm sitting there thinking, or even during the entire time, I'm like, oh, what are they doing? And are they having a good time? And I'm so sad I'm missing out on that party. Well, the joy of moving on would say, okay, well, the reason you want to go to the party is because you want to show your friend that you love her. All right, well, call her up and set up a one-on-one coffee date. Mm-hmm. Ask her if she can come over for lunch so you can love up on her and give her her present and wish her a happy birthday and tell her how proud you are in a space that works for you. And those other people that you wanted to see to catch up with, do the same. Call them up and either have a phone conversation or a FaceTime with them or set up a one-on-one coffee date with them as well. Because then you don't have to miss out on what is the true reason why you want to go.
Right.
And you can still stay within, what works for you at the moment. So that's how JOMO came to be for me.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a very powerful tool that, you're able to utilize, because it sounds to me like it's about the loss of control that can be very upsetting, right? Mm-hmm. Which I think most of us can relate to as well, to varying degrees, where, life happens and you got to deal with whatever's happening, right? Yeah. For you in that case, it was this cancer situation. I mean, not situation, but life had dealt you this hand, and there were all these restrictions that you had to follow. And, it comes down to being able to say, okay, well, am I going to just sit here and be unhappy about it? And that's going to be the whole experience? Or can I still figure out a way to do things that I want to do despite it, right?
Yeah.
And so for you, that you found a great alternative, which is just connecting with those people individually because you couldn't go to that party, or, whatever it is that would work for a person in any given situation. It's like, if you can step back, identify in yourself what's really going on, what you want and why you want it, then all of a sudden, and you're not fixed on the one solution that you can't do, right? Then it starts to open up various alternatives of like, okay, well, there's other things I can do. Maybe it's not the number one choice, but maybe it's number 2 or number 3. And maybe those are just as good, or maybe they turn out to be even better because you could spend an hour with each of those people just one-on-one, right? Instead of 10 or 15 minutes at a party, because there's so many people to talk to, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, I recently did a blog post about how, for me, this whole pandemic that we've all are still in some ways going through felt a lot like cancer in a lot of ways. But for what was coming up for me as we were all trying to navigate the unknown of this, it felt really similar to my cancer diagnosis and my cancer journey. In both cases, they kind of came out of nowhere. Yeah. Right? At least that was the case for mine. They just came out of nowhere. It completely shut down life as I knew it. There were all of these rules that you needed to follow to keep yourself safe. There were all of these things that you could no longer do. I mean, I, as your listeners can probably hear, am from America, but I am currently living in Amsterdam. And so that instantly made my family very far away. Mm-hmm. And the rules kept changing. The information kept changing. The time we were going to have to spend in this quote unquote new normal kept extending. So we kept like, okay, we're almost out. Oh no, shit, we're not. Yeah. Oh, okay, we're almost, and this was like this crazy roller coaster ride, which was exactly my experience through cancer. Right. I kept getting, okay, in 6 weeks, we're going to reverse this colostomy. Oh no, wait, we can't do that. This other tumor has grown. So now it's radiation. Okay. At the end of that. And it just was all this constant start stop that indeed, like you said, left this feeling of complete uncontrol. That's not really a great
powerlessness.
Word, no powerlessness. Thank you. Yes. This complete feeling of powerlessness and almost on some level, it could almost create some anxiety because you get excited for something, like the worry of what is the result going to be? What is the answer going to be? Because I keep getting my hopes up and then the answer keeps changing.
Right.
So now I almost get nervous to get excited, to look forward, to make any future plans. I just feel really stagnant and out of control. Mm-hmm. And I think for so many of us in the world, these last 18 months or more have really felt that way. And so again, JOMO for me and my husband was about, okay, we can't go to the States as often as we want to see our friends and family. So now let's set up regular FaceTime happy hours. We'll have happy hour. Our friends will be doing brunch because they're 8 hours behind. They'll have mimosas. We'll have cocktails and we'll play a game. We played charades over FaceTime. We've watched, with friends of ours who are big friends of RuPaul's Drag Race, we would have each other on FaceTime while we were each watching the Drag Race show so that we could make comments and, scream at the TV together and this type of stuff. So you just got creative about okay, how do we find the joy of moving on in this situation so that we can stay happy, stay sane, stay connected, feel like we have a sense of control.
Yeah, and not lose that hope, right? Because you're right, that constant fluctuation between it almost being over and then not really, or here's some good news and then here's some bad news, and then you kind of can get to a point where you're just like, I'm not even gonna just hope for anything anymore for this pandemic, because it's like, who knows what the fuck is happening, and it's all bad. And I mean, it's very understandable and reasonable to reach those conclusions, right? But if you stay there, then you're in for a miserable time, right? Until you either pull yourself out or someone pulls you out or something like that something changes, right? Where you make that decision to be like, okay, well, I can't do exactly what I want. So what's the next best thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's so true, because even though it feels like you're totally helpless and you're so out of control, the one thing you always have is choice, right? That decision to make a pivot, to do something different, to embrace JOMO and find something that does work in the situation. And, with my cancer, it was happening. And I could choose, and I did for a little while. Well, when it first happened, I was super angry and I was really pissed off. And I thought it was terribly unfair. And I was worried about the future, and I didn't want to die. And there was a moment when the doctors told me I might. And I was like, this is bullshit. I'm 41 years old. I had so much more life I wanted to do. I was really angry about it.
Yeah. Angry at the world.
Totally. And I could have stayed there. I could have stayed there in that space, and cancer still would have been happening, and everything that I went through, I would have still had to do. But staying in that place of anger and hatred and unfairness to what was happening, and really towards the lack of control, is really what I was upset about, just made everything that I had to do anyway more miserable. But if I could pick myself up, dry my tears, and look for the golden bits that were happening, this one-on-one time with these people how often do you get that, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's just because of the pandemic or if it was because I was going through this hard thing, but people made time to spend one-on-one time with me.
Yeah.
This pandemic has caused a lot of us forced a lot of us to slow down, which, to what you said earlier, has, I think, for many of us, showed us a quote unquote better way, a new way that actually works out better and supports us far more than this constant hustle, doing FOMO thing.
Yeah.
So to look for these sort of blessings in disguise, the silver linings, the little glittery bits, it made this cancer that I was already having to do so much easier to deal with. It changed the chemo appointments to this awful thing that I would be dreading for the whole week leading up to it, to this, I'd rather be doing literally anything else.
Yeah.
But Shane is going to come sit with me today. And I know he loves Mad Libs. And, you know, I know he's a big drag race fan, and I know his favorite treat is Snickers. So I'm going to get all this stuff, and Shane's going to sit with me, and we're going to have these 3 hours together, just him and me hanging out. And so it was something for me to look forward to that made sort of like the whole chemo situation of it secondary to
Right.
this other thing that I was going to get to do.
Yeah, and that's huge, right? To be able to do that, because not everyone can. And it makes a difference to everything. I mean, there's a huge scientific literature on how the person's attitude affects the healing journey, right? And the more you fight against it and are, you know, very upset and angry and all those negative emotions, the more difficult the treatment and often less effective it is, right? But people who are hopeful and are, you know, fighting and trying to get through it, like, it makes a huge difference, right? And that applies to just about everything in these situations where you're going through something terrible, and there's a few ways you can look at it and go about your business dealing with it, right? It's like, yeah, you don't have a choice about it. You can't be like, I don't want to live in this pandemic. It's like, yeah, well, you don't really have a choice. The pandemic's happening. There's nowhere to escape to. You can't leave the country. There's nowhere to go, right? There's nothing you can do about it. And so you can sit and you can fight against it, or you can say, okay, it is what it is, right? I don't like it, but that's okay. How do I still find things that I do like? Or what opportunities has this given me to reevaluate some things? Or, you know, how do I find out what's still meaningful to me and that I love doing that I can do anyway, or at least in a second best kind of option? So I can't go and see all my friends that I want to see, but maybe I can spend more time now on the phone with them, and they have more time because no one's commuting to work every day. And there's all these little ways that you can look at it, right? But there's also that point, right, where you have to accept what's happening, which is very hard for people, right? So what was that point for you, like on your cancer journey or during COVID, where you reached that point, like after the anger or the denial, where you were like, okay, I accept that this thing is happening to me, right? I don't like it, but I accept it. And now I want to figure out what to do from here. Well, was there a defining moment like that for you, or not really?
Yeah, you know, I think I think over my life, I've had several moments where I've been standing on sort of this crossroads between change and accept, right? And I really feel like you have those two choices in your life with absolutely everything. Like, there's really only two choices you ever have to make. Is this something that I can change, or is this something that I can't change and therefore must accept, right? And when we say accept, and this is what I coach a lot of my clients on a lot, is that accept doesn't mean forever. It doesn't mean that, like, oh, well, I guess I just have to accept this and it's always going to be this way and it's never going to be different. No, it can be accept for right now.
Yeah.
And so we work a lot on putting sort of expiration dates on the acceptance, where you go back and you reevaluate the situation. Has the situation changed enough where now this is something I can affect and change, or do I need to adjust my acceptance with it? And, you know, I think there were small little acceptances and changes along the way of the cancer, right? In some ways it was, cancer's happening. So, okay, I've accepted that cancer's happening. I mean, I didn't really, in that case, like, I can't change that. So I get to accept it, right? Okay, so I've accepted the big thing that's cancer is happening. I'm having all kinds of issues with the colostomy that I have. All right, so do I just accept that this problem is something I'm going to have forever, or can I change it? No, I can. This is an aspect of this that I can change with my diet, right? So now I'm going to get curious, and I'm going to start experimenting with different foods, and I'm going to start experimenting with different intervals of eating. And can I normalize my digestion so that I can eliminate some of these problems that I was having. And there's
Right.
all these little moments, I think, where you pause and say, okay, I don't like what's going on. I don't like it. For whatever reason, I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling scared. I'm feeling anxious, sad, whatever the feeling is. Your body is giving you sensations that are telling you, hey, wait, stop. Something's going on. Okay. So you stop, you check in. What am I feeling right now? Why am I feeling this way? What's going on to cause me to feel anxious? Is it something that I can change? No. Okay. Then I accept it. For how long am I going to accept it? Is it 3 minutes, 3 days, 3 hours, 3 years, 3 months? Set that timeline for yourself and then reassess at that timeline. Am I still feeling this way? Is there still nothing that I can change about this situation? And then we readjust and adjust your sails from there. I think, that's kind of, for me, what life is like, is a bit of just constantly checking in and saying, what can I change? What do I need to accept? And recognizing that either path you choose is never forever.
Yeah.
You might change it and then still not like it. So then you change again, or you accept one part. And it's just this constant sort of, shuffling around and building blocks and changing things in this, shell game almost of just like, how do I want navigating life, floating the river of life, really.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the journey that everyone is on, right? Is life's never simple and straightforward for anyone or anything, right? It's always full of challenges and obstacles and complications. And, from the first person perspective, that often feels like a problem. And that you don't want it to be that way. You want things to just be easy and good and fun and happy all the time. And when it's not, it can be very upsetting, right? But really, those are moments where you look back on it once you've come through and you're like, well, I've grown tremendously as a result of having gone through that challenge, right? I'm stronger or wiser or more in touch or happier or more aligned with what I want in the world. And, it wasn't a fun journey to go through necessarily, but the result might just be worth it in the end. And so, I mean, so this sort of leads me to another question, which one of the big things that you deal with people is the sense of overwhelm, right? And heightened, like, huge stress from multiple different sources, an overwhelming emotional experience. And that can be difficult to accept and change because it's so overwhelming, it can be paralyzing, right? And so what's the story about how to best approach that?
Yeah, overwhelm is one of those things that feels like when when you look at the whole picture at once, it's hard to see it, right? It's all you can see kind of is like what's in front of your face, but there's this whole big problem, situation, occurrence, circumstance, and you just don't, it feels too big to handle. So what I work a lot with on my clients is one, taking a step back so that we can see more of the picture, and then really just starting one small step at a time. So breaking it down into small bits. Going back to my cancer journey, that, I get it. One, the news is overwhelming. So all of a sudden I'm just like, whoa, this isn't what I planned. This is like news I did not expect. So that's already sort of knocked me off balance. And then they say, okay, you're going to need to do 12 rounds of chemotherapy every other week. So that's 6 months. And in between then you need blood tests and colonoscopies and CT scans and check-ins with the oncologist, and check in with your gastroenterologist, like all the doctors, and as I'm sitting there hearing this, I just feel like they're just putting another rock on top of me, and I'm just getting buried under this pile of all of these things that I have to do. And so what we did, my girlfriend and I sat down one day and we got one of those like big flip chart things and basically drew out 6 months on there and wrote in every chemo appointment, every doctor's appointment that I had. And on top of that, we wrote who was going to be sitting with me at chemo, what friends were coming into town, because at the time I was dating my Dutch husband. We were doing a long distance thing. He was living in the Netherlands and I was living in Salt Lake City. So we would write down when he's going to come and when he's going to be in town to visit me, and between treatments when I was going to be going there, so that then, and we put it up on my kitchen wall. So then I could come down and I could see it all. And it was one day at a time. What do I have to do today? Just today. I didn't have to think about and try to remember all the other things that were going on. I had written them down. I had made a plan. I just was dealing with today. And then we could exit off. And it made it manageable. It just was like one foot in front of the other, rather than trying to juggle all the things at one time, keep it all in my head, keep it all trying to remember. I just put it out there and made it easier to digest and break down. When it comes with emotions, like the sadness and the pain and the disbelief and the anger and all of those, what was really helpful for me was writing it down, talking to people. I had a coach through all of my cancer journey. So being able to talk to her about how I was feeling. And sometimes it was just that I needed her to listen to me, and her listen to me and not one of my loved ones, because they were already carrying so much for me. They were already holding so much space and love and healing and worry on their parts for me that yes, I showed my emotions to my partner, to my Dutchie. I would say, I would cry and be like, I'm just really sad. And I'm scared about what's going to happen. I wasn't trying to hide my emotions from him, but it was nice to have someone outside of my circle that I could just completely vent to.
Yeah.
And not feel like I was adding a rock on top of someone else as well. So having someone to talk to, being able to write it down, journal, or if journaling and writing down is not your thing, all of our phones and computers now have voice memos. You can just talk into your phone and just talk about how you're feeling, so that you get it out, so that you release it and you don't feel like you're having to hold all of that in.
Yeah, that's huge, right? And both of those points, I think, are crucial, of, the scheduling aspect and the emotional, release or the catharsis of dealing with that. And it's big, because when it is just stuck in your head, right, it definitely feels like a lot more of a problem than what's actually just happening in front of you. And all we ever really have is exactly what's happening right now, right in this moment. One moment at a time, one day at a time. And whether you're writing it all out because you need to have that schedule so you can see, it's all taken care of, right? It feels like a lot when I think of the 50 doctor's appointments or the 12 chemo and all that brings with it. And it's going to be so much suffering in all these days and everything's just too much, right? And none of that's happening right now. Maybe one of them's happening right now. Maybe you're at the doctor's, or maybe you're going to the doctor's later, right? And that's for an hour in the day. It's not even the whole day. But when it's just in your head, it just feels like a list of problems that are all happening right now. And when you can take a step back from that and say, okay, well, let me just plan it out, right? Maybe it's going to change, or I don't know exactly what's going to happen. But if I get it out of my head onto a piece of paper or onto your phone, it changes the nature of it. And it's a similar sort of thing with, emotional experiences where you have all these feelings and, thoughts and feelings about a situation, and you can get caught up in a spiral of like, it's all happening right now, right? And I'm feeling all the anger and resentment and fear and sadness, and all of that's just too much all at once, right? But then you take the time to write it out, or to speak it to someone, or to speak it to your phone, or to yourself, or to the mirror, or whatever it is. And that's amazingly cathartic for some reason, right? Even though that doesn't actually go anywhere, or necessarily you're not going to look at it like the schedule, right? You're not going to be like, oh, well, I'm planning my emotions for the future. It helps you to process it, I guess is a good word to say, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think what it does for me is, I don't know about you, but the voice that's in my head, she's not very nice, and she's often kind of crazy, the things
Yeah.
that she says inside there. And, you know, with like depression and feelings of sadness and depression, it's often because we're stuck in these thoughts from the past about woulda, coulda, shoulda, you know, all the things I could have done, should have done, would have done, what they could have, should have, would have done, right? We're just all stuck back in the past. Well, that's done. There's no going back. I mean,
Yeah.
sure, you can make amends, right? You can ask for forgiveness. You can offer forgiveness. You can apologize, but you can't go back and repeat it. So that's done, right? And anxiety is when we're stuck all in the future and we're worrying about all of the what ifs. But as you said, like right now is all we have. And so often being able to just hear yourself saying the words out loud to someone, or writing it down, or speaking it into your phone, can sometimes highlight for you the absurdity of what you're thinking.
Yeah.
Right? Like, actually, now that I'm saying this out loud, it actually sounds really kind of ridiculous and not likely whatsoever. So why am I worrying about this?
Yeah.
And if you're working with like a coach or a therapist or someone like that, they can ask you quite a bit of questions like, is that true? Why do you think you feel this way? And then you can tie it back to like, oh, well, you know, when I was a child, something happened, and now I just this feels very similar. And so I'm being thrown back into that event that was very scary for me. When in reality, it's not anything like that at all, but the physical emotions feel, the physical sensations feel really similar. And so then mentally and emotionally, you're chucked back 20 years into when that event happened. And
that's always fun.
Yeah, right. That's always a good trip, isn't it?
Yeah.
But so that's why I think processing it out loud is really helpful, because it can release some of that energy around those emotions and help you, see that actually what you're feeling is just a whole bunch of other crap attached to the moment, and the moment is actually none of those things.
Yeah. It's weird how that works, right? Like with the emotional stuff about when you say it out loud, or you write it down, or you tell it to someone, or whatever it is, it changes the nature of how you think about it. I'm not exactly sure why, but perhaps it's something to do with, what I think about now is it's like, well, when I'm thinking about things, they're usually very fragmented, right? They're like fragments that I know all of the connections to, or at least I think I do. And you just get like bombarded with like 1,000 different fragments from all over the place that, is a huge situation. But then you try and, rationally explain it to someone, or to yourself, or to your journal. And you're like, oh, it's actually, this is just like one little thing, or it's maybe one big thing, but it's not actually connected to all other things. It just feels like it is, because your brain's making all those associations and connections, and then some sort of processing happens that allows you to work through that emotional experience to be able to understand it and then accept it and move on, right? It's very curious.
It is very curious indeed. And it's like it's almost like your brain is always trying, right? From the moment that we're little kids, we now are having experiences, and our brain is having to remember and categorize these different experiences, these different interactions to keep us safe, right? So is this safe? Is this harmful? Does this taste good? Does this taste bad? Does this hurt me? Does this not hurt me? And we're having to, our brain just kind of creates these indeeds, like you said, these connections, and then files it, right? So if you have a scary experience as a child that makes your heart rate pound out of your chest, and your palms super sweaty, and your armpits sweaty, and you feel like you want to scream, and you feel really unsafe, fast forward to 40 years later, and those same physical sensation, your brain goes, oh, we know that. We know that's this thing that happened. And you're like, no, wait, it's not at all that thing. I'm actually sitting at the top of a roller coaster, and I'm scared because we're about to go over the edge. I'm not in danger at all, but the sensations feel the same.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's a bit, I think sometimes too, the talking and the journaling it out, the just like processing of how you're feeling and the thoughts that you have in your head help your brain sort of recategorize, recatalog.
Yeah.
Make
Definitely.
new connections, so you can unravel, or you can detach that one connection, like undo that rope and say, I don't need that anchor anymore. I can attach this to a new anchor. I can attach this to a new meaning, a new feeling that helps me move forward. This one is outdated. It's not accurate anymore.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of neuroplasticity, right? Is that you can always change and make new connections and learn and grow. You're never stuck in how things were. And it's also good, I like what you had said about the difference between like communicating with your loved ones and with a coach or a therapist or a journal, where there's no, whatever it is that prevents you from doing that with other people that you care about. It's like, well, this is a real, like, as objective or out of your inner circle as you can get, right? You don't have to fear judgment or repercussions or worry about burdening them or, what they're doing for you or whatever it is. It's like, this is a space where you can just be free to just say what you got to say, try and make those connections. It's helpful to have a person like a therapist or a coach to be there with you to hold the space and can guide you along a little bit. It's not just you free, associating in your journal. It's like they're there with you, right? And they offer a safe space to do so. That's different because it doesn't come with all the strings and conditions attached to having a relationship with the person that you're worried about preserving, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. If in the case of me, I'm not saying that you shouldn't, neither of us are advocating to not communicate with your loved ones and your partners. You certainly should, right?
Yeah,
but sometimes there are some of these big emotions that it's helpful to sort of sort it through and work it out with a non-attached third party to then have a productive conversation with your loved ones. My partner and I definitely cried and had lots of conversations about the cancer that was going on. But when I really wanted to get deep into my fear and all of that, he also had deep-seated fear about what this meant for us, about what this meant for me and all of that. And for me to tell him about all of that stuff, it either could feed his monster, right?
Yeah.
Or we both fall into the pit together because he's equally afraid, right? Whereas if I can talk to someone who's concerned for me, but not part of my inner circle, she, like she's my coach. She doesn't know me outside of that relationship. She can start to be neutral and ask me questions and talk me off of that ledge so that then I can work through some of that. And I can express my fear and my sadness with my partner, but not like the bottom of the pit kind of thing.
Yeah.
And, the same is true with like my mom, for example. She was a breast cancer survivor. So I guess it's about 20 years now ago, she had breast cancer. Well, it was a super traumatic experience for her. I mean, breast cancer is very different than colon cancer. The chemotherapy that you get for it is different. I never lost my hair. She lost all of hers. She did a couple of experimental treatments that made, I think she ended up getting chemo or some form of it, 2 different types for, I think, a year or maybe longer, a year and a half or something. Wow. She also had to get radiation and did not react well to it. I had radiation and I didn't have any issues with it. When I got sick with cancer, the one and only time she came to chemo with me was my last session when I got to ring the bell. It was too triggering, too traumatic for her. The smells of the place, the sounds, all of it brought back everything that she had gone through. And it was just too tough. Well, and I totally understand that. And I'm not angry with her at all for that. But I bring it up to say that, like, with family and loved ones, we all have our own experience to the situation that occurred. So for us to talk it out, I'm talking about my experience through my lens. You're talking about it from the experience of your lens.
Mm-hmm.
And it can get all mismatched and entangled. And we can start to feel like we're not being heard. We can start to feel like I'm being a burden to you. I can feel like you, as you said, judged, that you might think I'm weak because I experienced something traumatically and you were there and it was not a big deal for you at all. And you're like, what's going on, Karey? Why is this such a big deal?
Yeah.
You know, and so to be able to unpack that stuff with someone who has no connection is incredibly helpful. It's been so helpful for me many, many times in my life. I think I've had a coach or a therapist throughout my life since I was probably 20 years old.
Yeah, me too.
Off and on,
it's huge, right?
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily for everyone. It's just, you got to find what works for you. I mean, some people do it like with a priest or with some sort of religious something or other, or some people just have a friend that kind of just fits that role almost exclusively. And it's just very interesting. And yeah, just with regards to your mom and how she, how you guys dealt with that together, I think, some people could look at that and say, oh, well, she should have come with you or whatever it is a lot more. And I think that's, not looking at the full picture, because as you say, I mean, it was reactivating her trauma, right? And had that been happening while you were there with her having chemo, I mean, that would have just made it shitty for everyone, right?
Totally.
Who's benefiting from that? Rather just go see her afterwards or something, or have her come see you at your house or whatever it is.
Exactly.
Where you can be good and happy or whatever. You're not dragging each other down or making it worse for each other. You're uplifting, right, in that situation.
For sure. And my mom was a rock star for me during this whole thing. No, she didn't come to any chemo treatments, but she kept my house stocked with food. She and my dad came over nearly every night and watched movies with me and, got me water bottles. And after each chemo treatment, she and my dad and I would drive down to the deserts of Utah so that I could just be reminded that there was beauty in the world around. She did a ton for me. But yeah, certainly someone could hear this and be like, yeah, but she's your mom. She should have sat with you in chemo. No, she did all the other things. There were, you can't do all the things for all the people all the time. We all have our own stuff. What you can do is say, chemo, I think I might have a hard time sitting with someone in chemo. I coach clients, some that have gone through cancer and the ones that are going through it now, when they talk to me about their chemo that's happening, I can still taste it.
Yeah.
And I have to work really hard to just breathe and in my mind, remind my system, it's not happening to you right now. You are through it. It's not happening to you. Just breathe. You're simply hearing someone's story. You're not going to get a needle stuck in your arm right now. None of it, but I can taste it in my mouth. My feet get a little tingly. It's strange. It does trigger up actual physical sensations. So, what I can do though is say, I can do all the other things, but sitting in the infusion ward, I think that's a little too close to home for me. But I will be outside the door and take you to get your favorite ice cream the minute you walk outside, right? This is what I can do.
And that's great because, as you say, not everything is for everyone to do. And it's good to be able to accept and recognize that and not fight it or try and fight it on other people's behalf or whatever it is. It's no, let people sort it out, right? And they know what's good for them, and what you think might be good for other people might make it worse for everyone. Yeah. And who's that helping,
Exactly.
And the attunement that, you experience with your clients going through cancer, that's very interesting. And it's a thing that a lot of therapists experience even without having gone through it. But I can only imagine that when it's activating something in you that you've been through, it's really intense, right? Because you're not just what are these weird sensations that I'm feeling? It's more oh, I know what this is. And this feels bad. I'm used to this scary feeling. But you're not going through it, right? You're just here in this moment. sitting in your office or your room or wherever you're conducting these sessions, and nothing's happening. They're living through it with you, and you're just being there with them, right? But what an interesting experience it must be. I mean, not fun, but certainly interesting.
Yeah, it is. It is not fun, and it is interesting. And you know what I think this kind of goes back in the beginning. You said, you know, I help a lot of people be more resilient. And what that is for me, that experience that when it happens, is a reminder to me of my resilience, right? It helps me be even more resilient because it helps me catch what's happening and practice staying in the present, right? And I think that's really what resilience is all about. Like, life is never, I mean, sorry about it, but life is never easy. Yeah. We have easy times, but it's up and down, and things go well, and then something happens, and then it goes well again, and something happens, and then it goes well again, and something happens. And resilience is about being able to get up faster, you know, not stay there very long. Even though I've done all of this and I coach people on it, I still get upset. I still get knocked down. I still get bummed out. I still get disappointed. I still have the negative self-talk in my head. But the difference is that I have practiced. I don't stay there long. I catch it quicker. I'm able to shift out of it much sooner, instead of, when I feel that those sensations come on, start to tip over towards anxiety or tip over towards depression. I stay more in the middle of balance and can kind of rock back and forth, rather than doing more like a teeter-totter kind of thing.
Yeah, it's just a refinement, right? And every time that you go through it, you develop that resilience, right? You flex that muscle and it gets stronger. And, you know, I mean, when you're working out, or what, just as an analogy, it's like, yeah, well, if you're trying to get stronger, you're always going to be pushing yourself to places that are more difficult for you, right? So you start off with 1 pound, that's quite hard, hurts, whatever. Then at some point you're like, oh, this is easy, right? So then you go to 2, and then all of a sudden you're at that damn hard place again, right? Yep. And then you do that, and then next time it's 3 or 4 or 10, and you might even be at 50, and for a while it's hard, and then it's easy, and then all of a sudden you go to 55, and then it's damn hard again. And it's not a bad thing, right? It's all that constant progression of growth and strengthening your resilience, right? In whatever it is. And it's just, it feels a lot more real and visceral and emotional when you're dealing with like emotional resilience, right?
Totally. Yeah. And to use your analogy, you know, and then things happen like a pandemic or cancer that knock you all the way back, and you got to start again at 1 pound. And you're like, this is bullshit. Yeah. I used to be so strong. I used to be able to lift 50 pounds, and now I'm back here at 1, and this sucks and I hate it. And then your choice is, you can remember that you were there before, so you can go there again.
Yeah.
You remember that time is going to go by regardless. So even if I stop working out now, I'll never get to 50, being able to lift 50 pounds. But if I just keep going, someday I'll get there, and someday's coming anyway.
Yeah.
Right. And so that is like, that's life. That is exactly what life is. And it's about just, starting again and starting again and starting
keep going
again. And this moment and this moment and this moment.
Yeah.
You know?
And it helps knowing that you can get there, right? Like the first time generally is the hardest, because you don't know what you're capable of, right? So when you couldn't lift 50 pounds the first time and you had to start at 1 and you eventually got there, that's a tremendous, accomplishment. And then you injure yourself or something happens and you got to start again. At least now you know, okay, well, I know it's true that I can lift 50 pounds or I can train to lift it, right? At least. Right. And it's no longer a hypothetical of like, maybe I can't do it, or maybe it's for other people or whatever it is. Those doubts don't even come in. Maybe you get some new ones that come in, but that's for you. That's for your new challenge, right? And it's that mindset or that attitude. It's such an important thing to cultivate, right? Yeah. And you can do it multiple times a day. It's just momentary, right? It's just like,
Exactly.
how do I deal with this moment and not fight against it
Right.
happening, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's the central message of what we've been saying is chill out, or
Yeah, totally. Chill out and
be
get
present.
curious. Yeah,
Yeah.
and be present. Yeah. To use your exercise analogy, it's a really good one because prior to having cancer, I was, doing CrossFit 2 or 3 times a week and going to power yoga 2 or 3 times a week. And I could stand on my head and I could do like all these things. And I could squat, heavy weight and all of this. And then I get cancer. And then for 18 months, I'm not doing any of that. Well, those things had to go away. I was able to do Pilates and walk and go walking, but much more than that, I wasn't able to do it.
Yeah.
And I would cry in yoga class. I'd be so frustrated that like this, I used to be able to do this. I was so frustrated at having to start over.
Yeah.
But again, JOMO and this, getting curious and being in the moment was about, okay, actually I can reframe this. I can turn this around to say, instead of being frustrated and pissed off that I can't go into headstand from crow pose anymore, I can work on my crow pose in the correct way to do it. Because I was so strong and healthy anyways, I was in crow pose, but I was sort of compensating with all of my other strong muscles and wasn't really doing it with like activating my core and pushing my arms into the ground and this type of thing. And so now I have the opportunity to build my crow back up in the proper aligned way instead of quote unquote cheating like I was before.
Right.
Right. And so there's opportunities to reframe and to get curious and to be like, okay, well, let's see what's possible. I mean, now that I'm having to start over, what happens if I do it like this? Or perhaps, I can take it even further if I do it in the proper stacked way, if we're talking about yoga or weightlifting as the analogy. Right. And so, I don't mean to, and my point isn't that life isn't hard. It really is sometimes. And there are moments when it super sucks,
Mm-hmm.
And there's always a moment to reframe it, to get curious, to see, okay, what is in here? What's here for me to learn, to adjust, to grow stronger in, to let go of, to accept, to change, what's happening here? How can I flow and float and be in the moment and work with what I have and just be excited and curious to see what happens on the other side.
Yeah.
Once I'm through this,
And just one step at a time, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, don't get trapped in the illusion of like, it needs to all be good now. Or if this one step doesn't work, then give up on the whole process, because that's
Right.
not going to help anyway, right? It's like, I like the be curious part, because it's what I'm understanding you're saying is like, don't laser focus yourself on whatever it is your mind's trying to just be focused on, which is usually the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that you shouldn't focus on the problem, but the curiosity is like, well, let me explore around this problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
So firstly, well, for me, firstly would be like, well, how am I feeling? Let me check in, right, with myself. What exactly is going on? Sometimes it feels like, oh, I'm just all like, can't even explain, like it's just bad, right? Just bad feelings. And there's too much like fogginess to even like work it through. But then, you can take a step back, and for me, meditation was the sort of way I could do this, was just be like, okay, well, what am I feeling? What exactly is this feeling that I'm feeling? Not even necessarily to name it, although that helps sometimes. It's just like, just decipher what's going on, right? So whether it's physical sensations or emotional feelings, it's like, let me just see where that is, right? And then you can get a grip on that a little bit more. And then that's a starting point. And then the next thing from there is like, okay, well, in relation to this problem that I'm having, right? Why are these feelings there, and what do they mean? And okay, that's the message that I'm trying to, that's the message that my emotions are kind of telling me about this problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then that's one step. It doesn't mean it solves anything or does anything. It's just an understanding, right? Just being curious of like what's going on.
Right.
And then you take it a step further to be like, okay, well, now that I know where I am, at least a little bit more clearly than I did before, now I can think of actual things to do. Instead of just being stuck in the problem feeling, there can be actual options of like, do I want to do this? So, acceptance or change, as you were saying, right? So do I have to accept it? Maybe. Oftentimes you do. I mean, always you have to accept what's happening now.
Right.
So it's a little bit crazy to resist what's real in the present moment, but sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. But sometimes there is something you can do about it. And then real options start to open up, and you can be like, okay, well, either I'm just going to move on from this if it's, worked itself out, or I can do this, or I can do this, or I can do this. Right? Is that the kind of curiosity that you're talking about, of just figuring it out?
Yeah, I think it is the curiosity. It's the curiosity of, okay, like you said, the curiosity of what am I feeling? What physical sensations, what emotional sensations, where am I feeling these? To kind of just explore a bit like hide and seek, what's going on here, looking behind all the curtains. And then I think the next step for me would be to ask myself, what am I making this mean? And as it relates to starting a business, for example, you could say, I want to start a podcast, right? I don't know the first thing about podcasts, and there's so many podcasts out there, and what equipment do I need? And what's the software that I need? And who would I even interview? And what is the point of view that I want to have? And oh my gosh, it just feels so overwhelming. Okay. Whoa, breathe, take a step back. Why do you want to have a podcast? Because I feel, we just start to ask why. And if you don't have it, what are you making that mean? And the fact that you're feeling nervous and overwhelmed by everything that needs to happen, what are you making that mean? Oh, I'm making that mean that I don't know what the hell I think I'm doing trying to start a podcast. Who do I think I am? Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, is that true? Is that what happened? Did you try something in the past that didn't work out, and then people around you didn't support you and said, see, I told you that was a dumb idea. And are you attaching all of that to this? Yeah. So it's a bit of just like, let's just find out what's happening. And isn't that fascinating? So that's happening. That's a new word I just made up.
I like it. Yeah.
Happening and fascinating is happening. But that's the idea, is to just like, and then just get curious about trying stuff, right? Yeah. So let's just see. I don't know if this is going to work, but let's try it and see what happens. Oh yeah, actually this worked. Part of it worked out really well, and part of it not so much. Okay. So then let's pivot and let's try something else. And we just kind of continually course correct and get curious about what's around the next corner, what's behind the next emotion, what's the next right step, what's the next outcome that's going to come. Because the truth is, none of us know what the hell we're doing. You have a podcast. If I wanted to start a podcast, you'd be a great resource for me to say, hey, Shane, I'm thinking of starting a podcast. What's some of the things that I should know? What equipment would you recommend? Yeah. What software things have you tried? And you could tell me your experience, and then I'm going to need to give it a go. And I might say, Shane recommended that I use this platform, but I've tried and it just, I don't know, it's too hard and cumbersome for me. I actually like this one. Great.
Yeah.
So curiosity for me is just like continuing to ask the question, why and what does it mean? And what's next?
And feel good about it, right? Feel good about the curiosity. No, it's not like fearful curiosity. It's excited and exciting in an anticipatory way of like, maybe like this might be awesome, or this might be great, or maybe it's not so much. But when you focus on the good parts of it, then it's an exciting journey to have rather than a fearful one, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It's a bit
where
like
possible.
Yeah, for sure. I as you were saying that, what was coming to mind for me is my almost 3-year-old grandson, and just watching him navigate the world and try new foods and try new colors and start to recognize himself in the mirror and start to see himself in pictures and start to see himself as a younger baby. So he's starting to recognize like, hey, that's me as a baby, and try out his little scooter and try out his bike and fall and swimming pools. And it's just like, and rain puddles. And I mean, if you ever want just a perfect example of complete and total curiosity without the fear attached, it's kids. And
yeah, it's magical.
It's super magical. And if there's a way that you can bring some of that child back to be more present with you and in your interactions, life's just a hell of a lot more fun. Yeah. And that curiosity can stay really top of mind. Like, I don't know, let's see what happens. Let's see. Let's try it.
No, absolutely. And it's super important. And kids are the happiest creatures around, or the happiest humans, at least. They're always just, how can I have fun? What's this? What's that? What's that? How do I, that's cool. I want to do more of this, or I want to eat all the cake, or, just there's no worries. They're not fearful of anything. I mean, they might get scared sometimes, but they're not worrying like, us, adults have the anxiety. They're just being and exploring and enjoying the world, right?
Exactly.
They're not stuck thinking about all the crazy things in life.
Well, and they're also not stuck attaching all of this other bullshit to it. They're not. My little grandson comes up and he's Oma, Oma, which is grandma in Dutch. So Oma, Oma, dance party. And then we put music on and he just dances all over. He doesn't care what he looks like. He's not checking himself in the mirror. He doesn't care. He doesn't care at all. But at a certain point, we start to lose that, and we do start to care. I don't want to look like a fool. If you're a woman, you're like, my worth is wrapped up in how I look with my hair and my body, right? I don't want to sound like an idiot. I'm trying to learn Dutch living over here, and it's incredibly hard. And I just need to be like my grandson. He's 3. So he's learning to speak, and he doesn't say it properly with all the right pronouns and adjectives and all of this, Oma, dance party. That's what he said last time I was there. Oma, dance party. Yeah. I mean, he's not, grandmother, would you like to have a dance party? But I know what he means. And I'm like, hell yeah, let's have a dance party. But yet as an adult at 45 trying to speak Dutch, I don't want to look like an idiot. I don't want to feel stupid. So I get afraid and I hold myself back. And the only thing that's happening is I've lived here 3 years and I still don't speak Dutch.
Yeah. And
whereas if I had dove in and just been like a child, I'd be fluent.
Yeah. And the reality is also that most people would probably, welcome you trying to learn the language and help you and say, oh, I can't believe how well you speak, even if you're speaking like a 3-year-old. It's like, most people are like that. I mean, some people aren't going to be like that and they can really bum you out. But, if you can move past those idiots, you can get to the people who will just enjoy this new life of creation, right? And applaud you for even trying to learn it, because most people don't, right?
Yeah.
And most people get stuck being afraid and overwhelmed by it. So listen, it's huge.
Totally.
But anyway, listen, I think this has been a tremendous conversation. I've really enjoyed it. Where can people find you? I'll include links to your website and that in the descriptions, but just if you want to give a quick promo for yourself, please do.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks, Shane. It was really a great conversation. It felt super easy. I really enjoyed it. And the best place to connect with me is on my website, which is kareyoncoaching.com, and it's spelled like my name, Karey. So kareyoncoaching.com. And then you can find me on Instagram at Karey Spransy.
Great. Check it out. If you're looking for a coach, highly recommended.
Yeah. And, please.
I look forward to speaking with you again. This was a pleasure. So thank you.
Same. Me too. Thank you, Shane.
Take care. All right.